Alright guys, it is Miss More White coming to you guys with another video. This video is about businesses and their connection to slavery in the past, as well as modern day slavery that we still see impacts of, as well as the institutions of, including human trafficking, sweatshops, immigration detention centers, mass incarceration or prisons, as well as farm workers and sometimes what they have to go through in order to support their families. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about are the first things, or the first, our business. What is America known for? We're really known for business. And one of our business endeavors, or one of the places that we do a lot of business, is called Wall Street. Wall Street's in New York. So when I was growing up, I was like, this is cool. People sell stocks. That's parts of businesses or parts of a company. That's really awesome. But what was the first thing that was ever sold on Wall Street? And when I did my research, I found out that slaves were in fact the first things ever sold on Wall Street. And that kind of puts things in a bit of a different perspective. It's like, well, if they have all these billions of dollars and all this money and all this riches, but they were founded off of slavery, that means that they basically got all their wealth and all of their money and their standing and their stature off the backs of black people. So it kind of got me looking and saying, well, what other companies or what other businesses were around during slavery times that benefited from slavery? So I looked it up, and I see that a lot of our modern day banks have owned slaves, or have owned or bought out companies that used to own slaves, including J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. And they've all admitted to such. So basically you're saying that these banks got money and got riches off the selling of African American people or enslaved people. And after they were enslaved, then the banks also used to finance or used to provide mortgages for a lot of different plantations where they used to actually abuse slaves, grow crops, and then those farm owners, those plantation owners, would then take that money that they earned from slaves, off the backs of slaves, and then put it back into the banks, further enriching the banks, further enriching the plantation owners. So it was a never-ending cycle, and the one group of people that was getting no benefit from that is going to be African Americans or enslaved people. And then to make it even worse, there are going to be companies, including New York Life, like life insurance companies, that would insure the value or they insure the life of a slave. And if a slave passed away or was murdered or ran away or whatever it was, they would pay out money to the owner of the slave. So a lot of interesting kind of things. So basically a lot of companies that make a lot of money to this day got their roots and made a lot of money based on slavery times. And that's not even including some of the smaller companies, including Colgate. Brooks Brothers used to use slavery because of the cotton. That's like a soup company. You have Domino Sugar, that's going to be sugarcane. They're going to turn that sugarcane into molasses, and it turns to the last company I'm going to talk about, which is going to be different alcohol companies, including Captain Morgan, where they turn that molasses into rum, and that was all produced by slave labor as well. Something else that has benefited greatly from slave labor that people don't want to talk about, but it's starting to get a lot more attention, are going to be a lot of our Ivy Leagues and prestigious universities are going to have a lot of assistance from slaves, or even sell off slaves in order to continue running and functioning in some of their early days. Georgetown University is a great example of that. They had to sell off a group of slaves in order to pay their mortgage or in order to continue running. And those slaves, their ancestors, or their grandchildren and great-grandchildren now get free tuition if they're able to get into Georgetown. But you also have Harvard. Harvard has one of the largest endowments in the nation. Their endowment is $40.9 billion. So $40.9 billion is what Harvard is worth. But Harvard also had buildings that were created by slaves. They used slave labor. So a lot of Harvard's early greatness was achieved by slave labor. Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, Brown, all of those are places and schools that also would not be as thriving as they are today if it were not for slave labor. All right, so that is the end of talking about companies or institutions that were profiting off of slavery back in the 1800s, well, 1619 all the way through 1865. But I said this video was going to talk about modern day companies that are still benefiting from different types of slavery. So I think the easiest slavery to kind of point our eyes to our direction to is going to be mass incarceration. So there's a thing called the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment gave freedom to recently freed slaves, or recently freed enslaved people. But at the same time, it would take away your rights to be a citizen if you committed a felony or a crime, which means that there are going to be people who have committed felonies or crime that may not be violent. They could be nonviolent crimes that had no impact, didn't cause any kind of extreme harm to additional people, just kind of harming themselves or doing societal things. But those people are locked away in jail, lots and lots and lots of Americans. America has the highest rate of incarceration in the whole entire world. So for so 1 out of every 4 incarcerated prisoners in the world lives in the U.S. So one more time, 1 out of every 4 incarcerated people in the world lives in the United States. The U.S. has a very small amount of the world's population, but it has the largest amount of prisoners in the world. Okay. And so with that, so once again, we have a government or a system that was designed to basically profit off of enslaved bodies. So if they can get you to commit a felony, be that through circumstance or through taking a plea deal, another video for another time, I'll talk about that later, then they can take away your right and force you into a form of slavery. So most prisoners, I won't say most prisoners, but most prisons do have some kind of form of prison labor in which they utilize or underpay prisoners to do certain services. One thing in California that we have, or that the prisoners here typically fight fires at very low rates for about $2 a day. The firefighters who are actually, official firefighters might be getting paid upwards of over $1,000 a day. But these prisoners are only going to make $2 a day to fight the same fires that people get paid $1,000 per day or more for. That is a form of slavery. So anyway, that's just one kind of job that prisoners have. But let's talk about some of the industries that benefit directly from slavery. So we have Whole Foods, we have McDonald's, we have Sprint, we have Nintendo, we have Honda, we have Victoria's Secret, we have Target, Texas Instruments, the people that make those calculators that all of you guys have, the graphing calculators or the non-graphing calculators. Starbucks, Walmart, all of those places are going to utilize prisoner labor in some capacity, whether that be from picking crops or from designing things or building things or whatever that is. You're going to see that those companies that I just listed are all going to utilize prisoner labor. All right, so we move on from prisoner labor. After prisoner labor, I was talking about sweatshops too, and how sweatshops are another form of modern day slavery. So sweatshops, what companies are going to support sweatshops? Unfortunately, it's going to be a lot of the ones that we know and love. One company that's been busted recently, I won't say recently, but in Los Angeles specifically, is going to be Fashion Nova. So for those young ladies who support Fashion Nova, just know that they were busted utilizing factories that employed sweatshops or sweatshop labor or human trafficking labor very, very close to us in downtown Los Angeles. So not very far, and that happened at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year. Other companies that also support sweatshops are going to be Adidas, Disney, Forever 21, H&M, Victoria's Secret. They made the list 2 times, both for using prisoner labor as well as using sweatshops. Zara, and a lot of other companies that have cheaper prices. If they had to pay people fair wages, the things that we love, our t-shirts, our clothing, our shoes, would cost much, much, much more money. But oh well, you treat people fairly, okay? So that, and the last one, this is a really, really important one too. So I also did some research on detention centers. I'm saying, well, what's going on what's going on in immigrant detention centers. So last week we found out, or it was discovered, that women are being forcefully sterilized, but these immigrant detention centers also have a bit of labor aspects to them. So a fair amount of these centers have what are called voluntary work programs, but they're not so voluntary, and it's more like slave labor. So voluntary work, they employ people so they can have small jobs to help out the facility or to help out other big businesses that require that type of labor. And these volunteers get paid between $1 and $2 per day to basically do more slave labor. So there are a lot of industries that we have in America, either past and even to this day present, that represent the slave system and the slave marketplace that America had and that was thriving in America. So when people oftentimes say, why don't people get over slavery? It's because slavery has never ever ended and is still going to this day. There's so many, once again, industries, and we haven't even talked about people in actual prisons and just the amount of industries that are supported directly by prisons, from laundry places, food places, telecommunications, your phone places. All of those industries thrive off of prisoners, but they really thrive off of the prisoners' families who are paying for all of these services, as well as the taxpayers who are paying to house prisoners at exorbitant or really, really high prices. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video that showed you guys some companies that were around during slavery time, that profit off of slavery, and that are still around today, still profiting, still using that wealth that they gained from slavery, as well as some modern companies that were not around back in the 1800s that are profiting off of more modern forms of slavery, including prison labor, sweatshops, immigrant detention centers, and things like that. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and look out for the next one coming next week.